Hello everybody, welcome to Red Toolhouse. I want to address a question. Are there huge maintenance costs associated with owning large tracts of acreage? So come along, let's dive into it. So the motivation for this video comes from a comment I just got recently on a 2-year-old video dealing with land. And I'll read that to you. 2 acres is a nightmare to maintain even for lower end rich man, parentheses, few millions, that has a few pieces of machinery and a few hired hands from time to time. 43 acres is going to be hell on earth unless you have lots of time and lots of big equipment. Now that comment was on a video I did 2 years ago where we did a property assessment of 43 acres that a guy bought for $11,000. And we just talked about how that was a really good deal for him. And normally a comment like this, a one-off, I'd be like, well, all right, yeah, it's maybe just somebody just trolling, or maybe even being a little ignorant to the discussion of property and large tracts and land management. But it's actually not the only comment like this that I've gotten in the past several months. Anytime we talk about large tracts of land, people are like, hey, you got to consider the maintenance costs. They're crazy. You could get a great deal on land, but the maintenance costs will absolutely wear you out. So I want to talk about, what are those maintenance costs? What exactly are we talking about here? Is this even a legitimate concern? So let's start with the bare minimum costs required for maintaining or owning a large tract of undeveloped land. There's really only one, and that's property tax. Now, I live here in the state of West Virginia where property values are low, so the property tax is low. In fact, let me read a quote to you. Figures compiled by the Tax Foundation show that median property taxes in nearly every county in West Virginia are below $1,000 a year, and in some cases, they are a fraction of what homeowners in many other states pay. So in West Virginia, the median property tax is less than $1,000. Now, in full disclosure, on this 100 acres with a 2,000 square foot house and all the outbuildings and everything we have, my property tax is just at $1,200 a year. So it's a little bit above the median, but not that much. Now, my off-grid property, my 2 acres with the small off-grid camp up in the mountains, it's $97 a year. If you have undeveloped land in other states where property values are much higher, then of course expect to pay more. But property tax is really the only unavoidable expense when it comes to owning undeveloped land. If you follow the channel, then you know I recently purchased 4 adjacent acres, which is just through those trees over there, on the other side of the county road adjacent to my land. And I've had that for a year now. So what maintenance have I done to that land? Absolutely nothing. I've done zero maintenance. In fact, the more I leave it alone, the more that hardwood forest just gets bigger and bigger and increases in value. Now, it's not going to do much over a year, but I'm not planning on doing anything with that land this year. Next couple years, we do plan to do something. But right now, zero maintenance. Just pay the property tax on it, and that's it. When the time comes to do some development, do some other things, that's when we'll invest more money in maintenance. So if you're thinking about buying land for future homesteading lifestyle, but you're worried about what's it going to cost to have this land set fallow for the 5, 10, 15 years until I can retire or generate enough revenue or bank enough money to be able to go live that lifestyle, what are those costs going to be? Well, really, it's just the property tax. Every other expense of maintenance other than property tax is totally the landowner's choice. You choose what you want to do to increase maintenance costs and maintenance efforts. Let me give you an example. Now, this example is going to have an Appalachian bias because that's what I know. But I think these examples and these points are going to be pretty much in line with any land in any terrain or any climate. There may be some slight variation, but I think all in all, these examples still stand. So in this example, let's say you bought a 40-acre tract of land here in West Virginia, and out of the 40 acres, 10 acres was cleared meadow, pasture land, hay meadow, whatever you want to call it. What are some of the basic maintenance things that I would think you would need to do for that land? Well, number one, of course, would be keeping the cleared land clear until you're ready to use it. So to me, in that situation, 30 acres that are hardwood forest, I'm not that concerned about as much as I would be the 10 acres of pasture land. You say, well, okay, what are my options here? If I'm not going to live on this land for another 5 or 10 years, What should I do about that 10 acres? Well, if you just left it alone, in 3 years, you couldn't be able to walk through it. It would be so overgrown. In 10 years, it would actually be a juvenile hardwood forest. So it's actually going to go back to hardwood forest the way God intended. So maintenance options you could do, of course, would be you come over and you mow it. In that situation, maybe you could get away with mowing it 2 times a year. But there's other options. You could obviously lease the land out for hay production. You could lease the land out for grazing. Or you could actually just ask somebody, hey, would you like the hay for free, or would you like to graze for free on this land if you take care of fencing and all those type of things? And that's not uncommon. In fact, many, many years ago, my brother and I spent a couple years just going around our county, and we were cutting multiple hay meadows for free because the landowner didn't want to maintain it, and he wasn't looking for any money. He just wanted to have somebody come and cut it so it would stay clear, unless he wanted to use it later, because here in West Virginia, cleared land, there's not a lot of it. The recent property assessment I did down in Tennessee was a very similar situation. Before the current property owner acquired the land, somebody was allowing another person with livestock to graze it so the 22 acres of pasture land wouldn't revert to forest. It was a win-win for everybody. Now, the second basic maintenance suggestion I would have would be if the property, so we'll use our example again, if those 30 acres of hardwood forest have access roads in them, maybe it's worth keeping those open if it's going to be a while before you come to use the property. And by keeping them open, I mean, maybe you come through here once a year and mow. That's the situation I've got here, a little bit of growth. I'll mow this in the fall. A little autumn olive growing right there behind you. Maybe trees fall across, so you've got to clear some trees out of the way. Or maybe ditch lines get clogged up and they're cutting across your road and causing some erosion. So maybe it's basic maintenance like that. Although, if it's going to be a long time before you use the property, if it's that 5-10 year window, then I would really want to weigh the cost to say, well, if I come over here annually, especially if it's a long distance, it's in another state, and I come over here annually, or I got to hire somebody to do that, is it worth just waiting, even if these roads grow up and you're coming through here and having to cut small saplings out of the way or use an excavator to grub out some stumps? Maybe that's still cheaper for a week's worth of work than 5 to 10 years worth of annual maintenance. Those are the things you need to weigh there. My pig thinks it's feeding time, so he's come over here. Not yet, dude. We feed on the other side of the valley today. You're on the wrong side. I see you found the mud. So my third basic maintenance suggestion on lands you're not yet going to use would be to keep moving water in its place. And this will be different for tracts of land. It really depends on what type of water we're talking about. But seasonal streams or larger creeks that you may have, there's a tendency sometimes when there's debris or a large rain event to block up certain areas, and the water gets diverted and causes erosion in other spots that you wouldn't want to happen. So maybe that just simply requires an annual check or a check after a major rain event, just to make sure there's no debris, there's no blockage here that's going to cause an issue. Now, some of y'all further up north, you got these little furry creatures called beaver that make this more of an issue. So you can end up having beaver that flood your entire property. So you have to have some control and mitigation in that situation. We don't really have beaver problem here. Okay, so vacant on undeveloped land seems pretty simple. But what about land you're living on or land that you plan to be living on? Are the maintenance costs going to skyrocket once you decide to go there and start working the land? Well, let's use our example here. So here on the foothills of West Virginia mountains, we have 100 acres. And see the house? We like to treat our 100 acres very similar to the way you would permaculture zones. If you're familiar with that, it's like a bullseye, zone 0 all the way out to zone 5. Zone 0 being the house, being the place that you are at every day, and then the outer circles of the bullseye are places that you're at less and less. So for us, zone 0, basic house maintenance rules apply. You got to maintain your house. That's part of it. As you broaden out a little bit around zone 0 into zone 1, then we have yard maintenance type of things. There's a reason why when I built the house on this spot that we only wanted the yard to be a certain size. I don't like mowing grass, so when we built the house, I wanted a small yard. We mowed less than 1/8 of an acre, if even that. And the only thing we have to do when it comes to landscaping is we have to keep the deer from eating everything. Kelly hates us forsythia, so she's tickled to death that the deer are eating it up. So zone 2 is what I consider our active farm zone. It's kind of an odd shape because of the terrain, but it's these meadows here that we run our chickens in, broilers and egg layers. It's the woodlot area and pasture sections for the pigs. It's the workshop, the barn, the sawmill area. All that stuff that I have daily contact with because I come down and tend my animals daily. So what's needed there? Well, my chickens don't eat the grass fast enough in all of my meadows here, so I have to mow. And I usually mow this about 3 times a year. There's fence maintenance, fence repair. I want to make sure the road back to the sawmill and the barn and the workshop are clear and no obstructions. And I like to maintain a good gravel base there as well, so I can take the truck back. I don't have to just take the off-road equipment. I can take the truck back without knowing I'm going to tear something up. A little bit of water management with the drainage ditches, just make sure that they're clean and they're running so they don't end up running down the road and, of course, causing a base failure issue with the road. So our maintenance zone 3 is our retreat area, which is actually in the dead center of the property, so it's a little bit off the beaten path. But I've established a really good road base. We've got culverts that are funneling creeks under the road instead of running through them or having to do creek crossings. And then as you can see here, we've got some mowing that needs to be done. So the maintenance in this area is I mow this probably twice a year, sometimes once a year. Just check to make sure the road is clear, any fallen trees, that type of stuff, get that out of the way. And of course, just managing water, drainage ditches, making sure my culverts aren't plugged. Pretty simple. So when it comes to maintenance, I take zone 4 and 5 and kind of make a hybrid. Zone 4 and 5 overlay one another. 4 would be just the roads that get me around my property. We're standing on one of these right now. This is our north ridge that's south facing. And this road does a big loop. And I actually did a video last year, I believe, of kind of clearing this road up. It had been several years since I had done maintenance on it and getting the deadfall off of it. And it took a good day to get it all cleaned up. So that's kind of prompted me to say, okay, in the fall, it's time to do that. It's nice, the weather's cooler, lower humidity, the leaves are off the trees, you can see more, and be able to drive around and take care of that. So I was just up here recently, and I've got a couple down. So it's one of those things. It's do I take care of it now, or do I just wait and take care of it in the fall when I'm doing everything else? It's no big deal. I don't have to be back here. If there's some reason that I would have to, then I would need to remove those trees. But there's no reason for me to be back here. So zone 4 is the road maintenance, but zone 5 is kind of like the stun method, the sheer total utter neglect. I just let the woods do what the woods do, man. And that's the majority of our acreage. Of our 100 acres, that's the lion's share. And I just let it go back to being beautiful hardwood forest. If I see a tree that I absolutely love and want to have on the mill, like this red oak's pretty sexy, then I'll come get it. But otherwise, I'm just going to let it grow. It's to me, it's like a savings account. The trees continue to grow, they increase in value, and if I would decide to sell them at one point or bring them down for my mill, then they have actual value for me later. So maintenance on the majority of our property is almost zero. So let's try to quantify this into actual dollars and cents. So we're not dealing in the nebulous. We can maybe deal in the reality here in our example here on our farm. What does it cost me to do all the maintenance I just described? Well, let's look at our equipment first. So the first thing I needed was a tractor. And that tractor I bought in 2004, brand new, $18,000. Yeah, believe it or not, it was $18,000. Never found a price like that again. A chainsaw, I use a chainsaw regularly. Got one right there. That chainsaw, about $700, $750. I also use a weed eater a lot. So that weed eater I think was about $400. And then you could possibly count the side-by-side. The side-by-side is my primary source of mobility across the property, but I could obviously use the tractor if I wanted to, or I could hoof it. If you look at me, you probably think, Troy, you need to be hoofing it more. You're probably right. So, of course, then we have the regular consumables. You have fuel, you have parts and supplies, and then if you want to talk about labor, if I don't bring up labor, somebody's going to make a comment about it. So there's labor. We'll get to that in a second. So I've been on this property for 24 years now, and if I compiled all of this equipment, all of the expenses, here's what I've come up with. So in the 24 years of being here, I've got one tractor, 20 years old, 2 chainsaws. I'm on my second chainsaw. I'm on my second weed eater. I'm on my second side-by-side, which I already talked about. And then I actually went through my farm finances. I keep a spreadsheet of all this and itemized fuel consumption in 2022 was $1,000, just a cat's whisker over $1,000. Now that includes all the off-farm fuel as well. So anytime I'm driving for the farm, either to go pick up feed, pick up animals, transport animals to the processor, all that type of stuff. So that's probably 60% of our fuel costs, was the truck and the trailer doing all that type of stuff. So let's add all that up. So $18,000 tractor, 2 chainsaws at $750 each would be $1,500. 2 $400 weed eaters would be $800. A Honda Pioneer plus the amortization of the junk Polaris, $20,000. $12,000 in fuel, and I estimate about $2,400 in supplies, string, chains, all that type of stuff that I need. So that grand total for 24 years is $54,700. If we broke that out annually, that's just over $2,200 a year that I spend in maintenance. So to push back on that argument that you got to be loaded to be able to maintain large tracts of land, I'd say I debunk that. That's not accurate. I am by no means a millionaire. In fact, I'm not even upper class. I would say I'm right in the middle class if you look at my tax return. But it would be foolish for me not to recognize some of the obstacles, of course. There's the initial outlay of cash, the tractor purchase, some of these bigger equipment purchases. Those have to be made, so that cash has to be realized up front, or then you have to finance, and then you've got interest associated with it. So that drives up some of your maintenance costs, overall costs a little bit more. And then one thing I didn't factor in there was maintenance on the tractor. Knock on wood, that Coyote's been pretty much bulletproof. I think over the 20 years I've put maybe $500 of parts in it. So I've been very blessed to have a good running tractor there. And then you can say, well, Troy, what about your labor? Your time's worth something. And to that I say, yes, exactly. If this was a business, I would definitely be factoring my labor. But owning land, living the homesteading lifestyle isn't a business. You don't look at it as a business. If it was a business, you'd be smarter to go do your white-collar job or go do your 9-to-5 or whatever, make that money, and hire somebody to homestead for you. The whole point of this is just doing this, being able to be out and be a good steward of the little piece of God's creation that I've been entrusted with for just less than 50 years. That's the whole point of doing this. So to try to estimate the value of that time would be a little inconsistent with what we're doing here in our goals. So in all this, I would say don't be scared of maintenance costs or just afraid of this nebulous, unqualifiable expense that's going to be associated with property to the point that it paralyzes you and you don't move forward on your goals. A lot of you have commented and have talked to me that, you're waiting to get to a certain point financially to buy your land. And if you keep looking at these maintenance costs, you say it's going to be this, it's going to be exorbitant, it's going to be all these type of things. I got to be here. I got to crack this nut before I can get my land. Then just make sure you're doing a fair analysis of that. It may not be as expensive as you think, or it could be extremely expensive. It just depends on what your goal is. So let me give you some quick tips to leave with. Make sure you do have a goal. You've got some clear, concise goals for the land you want to purchase and what you want to do with it. Then do your homework and figure out what it's going to take to actually achieve those goals. And maybe those goals need to be staggered. Don't try to make the land be something it's not. It's like if I said, I wanted to come in here and have a big grazing operation with all this hardwood forest, it would cost a ton of money to get this land prepped to be all this pasture land for ruminants. A practical tip would be consider putting zone 0, your house, in that area you're going to be in the most. Put that as close to the county road access as possible that you're comfortable with. Again, the whole point of buying acreage is to get away from the hustle and bustle. But the further back you go on the land, the more maintenance expenses you're going to have in maintaining that driveway. And this tip is from experience. Put in quality infrastructure and buy quality equipment. Saving money on the front end to buy a tool that you're going to need every day or every week is going to bite you in the rear end when you go to use it and it fails. So invest in quality equipment, put the best infrastructure in you can afford, and that way your maintenance is going to be reduced over years. And if you're young, start small. So maybe you have a large tract of land that you're able to afford, but maybe your goals are only realized on the first 5 acres. But if you're young, you got youth and energy behind you, and as you build net worth, hopefully, then you can expand and you can go further out on that property as you acquire more income to be able to maintain that land. Conversely, have a plan to scale down if you're older. If you're getting into your retirement years, like I'm approaching, then have a plan to scale down. Maybe you're not going to maintain as much land. Maybe you're going to let it go back to what it was. Or maybe you're going to lease out a section of it to provide income in your retirement. Or maybe you even decide to sell off a section to a young family looking to get started with homesteading. Also, consider hiring somebody with some experience to do an assessment of the land that you're looking to purchase and maybe the goals you want to try to implement on it. I think what makes our assessment services valuable is the fact that over 24 years, I've tried to mold this land into something I want, and I've been kicked in the butt a lot. So I've learned from my mistakes, and I've also learned from my successes. And that advice or that experience could be helpful for somebody just starting out to say, hey, avoid this because this really kicked my butt when I tried to do it. Obviously, if you'd like to know more about our assessment services, you can just go to our website, redtoolhouse.com, and check that out. We like to stay in the greater Appalachian region, but we'd love to come look at your property and just try to help you build vision. So I want to throw out two announcements real quick. One is kind of different. It's not something I've done before, but I'm just curious. I know there's a lot of guys that watch the channel, and there's a lot of guys that are closer geographically to us here in West Virginia and neighboring states. Our church is hosting a men's retreat at the Summit Bechtel Reserve, which is the huge International Boy Scout camp down on New River Gorge, down in Fayetteville. We've been doing this for a couple years now, and it's an incredible 2-day event. Accommodation options allow the pricing to be affordable, and it's just going to be a really good 2 days of guys getting together, diving into the Word, having some great fun on the property, and really just discussing and explaining what it means to be a Christian man in today's culture. It's a great time of fellowship, a great time to hang out. I'll be there. I'm not speaking. I'm not doing anything. I'm just going to be another guy in the crowd. But it's going to be a great event. I'm going to post a link down below if you can come. Love to see you guys. Announcement number 2 is another event. Just a reminder, September 13th and 14th, we have our Homesteading-ish conference going on in Charleston, West Virginia. We've got a really good lineup. Joel Salatin, the Dohertys, Josh Draper. Got a lot of good people coming in. We have over 36 different topics that are going to be discussed in that 2 days. So it's going to be info-packed. Really inexpensive. I'm going to post a link down here to the tickets. You can check that out. We still have tickets for sale. And there's accommodations right by the venue. The venue is actually our church. It will accommodate an activity this size. So if you can make it, check it out, get your tickets. Would love to see you there. Well, I really appreciate you all watching. Comment below. Let me know. I know land management, land discussion, a lot of you guys really like. Let me know what other topics you'd like to see me discuss associated with land management, and I'll take them on. I enjoy it. I love getting out here in the woods with a camera. It's fun. Well, I pray everyone have a great week. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.